All right, it's John Reed. I'm rejoined by Reed and Sommer.
And we're here with the halftime report. That's right. It's halftime in the busy conference season. Once again, it's spring 2018, and all the major contenders are still running out there right now.
Well,
How about
actually, as far as I can tell, someone is on a stretcher and they're limping towards the factory of the future.
Oh, my God. We've had a lot on the injured reserve list. And let me tell you, we've got lots of vendors showing up at demos, but their idea of showing you a factory of the future deal is to bring in a 20-year-old barcode reader. I mean, get out of your chairs, folks. This is some exciting stuff we're seeing out at client sites on demos.
You know, it's funny because for sports teams, it's about losing people to injury. For vendors, it's about screwing up your Alexa demo. And
Cortana, show me my current account balance.
How many failed Alexa demos have we seen in the last few weeks? Crazy.
Every vendor's got one to share with us.
Yeah.
And only one really had really great humor, and that was one we saw where I think it was where the Sage cup showed up, coffee mug showed up.
Yeah.
At
the Acumatica show. Yeah. They toss a Sage cup aside. Yeah. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, we appreciate the humor there, folks.
So we're just riffing a little bit. Brian and I, we're at the IFS World Show. We just taped an IFS review, but we're about halfway through the spring kind of busy season of the conference circuit. And humor aside, we thought it made sense to just put our heads together and just share a few things, trends that we're seeing, and hot debates or topics that we're seeing across shows. And the limping to the factory of the future thing was one of them, but it ties into a beef that you have around ERP companies and their relationship to IoT. Do you want to say more about that?
Well, I mean, you can't swing a dead cat in one of these shows and not have somebody want to bend your ear about IoT, artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, natural language processing. Everybody thinks you got to pass an alphabet test to get moved along into some kind of selection. Unfortunately, talk's one thing, delivery is something quite a bit different. And more importantly, a lot of these vendors actually are so full of their own hubris. They think, and this is a related point, they actually think that ERP products are going to be the book of record going forward. Talk about dreamland here, folks. I mean, most of these ERP products were designed in an age of incredibly constrained technology. They have 30, 40-year-old data models that never imagined the kind of information coming out of sensors, coming out of unstructured data like emails and everything else. They never thought they would ever create applications for the kind of world that we have today.
So I just had an interesting interview with the CEO of DataStax, and I write about NoSQL here and there because I find the customer stories compelling. And what we were talking about was that it doesn't really make any sense. A lot of times I hear people saying, well, NoSQL's not ready for prime time, and this vendor's not ready for prime time until I hear about rip and replace jobs with you pulled Oracle out and you put this new database in. And what we were talking about, the CEO's name is Billy Bosworth, we were talking about how I view it as more of a gradual thing where you're going to use some cool new tech, maybe it's NoSQL, to build a new digital app to connect to your customers, whatever it is you're trying to do quickly. You're not going to mess with your system of record, whatever they call it, as you just discussed. You're just going to move ahead. But what's going to happen over time, I think, with IoT and data, which is also going to be processed in the cloud as well, is the center of gravity just moves towards the cloud. And so to insist upon a system of record in-house is I think, a little troubling when your data starts moving where it lives in the cloud. What's left on-premise? Not very much. And yet we talk to a lot of customers at these shows. I talked to one yesterday who was like, oh, we have no interest in cloud. And I'm like, well, things are changing, so it's going to be interesting to see how people survive these transitions.
Yeah, and okay, on that last point, I'll tell you, depending on the show you go to, if you went to Dreamforce, 100% of the folks there, they're all in on the cloud. Right. Not to steal a Microsoft euphemism there, but and same thing with the Workday deal is somewhat of a selection bias, depending on who you ask. But by and large, I could tell you, going to clients, IT shop after IT shop has gotten the message from the board or the executive committee that they want IT focused on the development of strategic applications. They don't want them running and building and maintaining and managing data centers. They want utility computing, and they want to and that's why so many of them are moving all their production load over to AWS cloud and those kind of things.
Right. But the problem with IoT-related projects being that you might claim that you're IoT-friendly, but if it's not easy to connect cloud-based data to your core systems, you're going to have a headache. I mean, you were investigating that just the other day, right?
I'm sorry. Just because you're an ERP vendor and you have an IoT connector, whether you built it yourself or you licensed it or using it from Amazon or whatever, that doesn't make you a player in the IoT space. And you're exactly right, John, that the center of the universe, ERP could probably try and say it's still the book of record, but it's only for transactions, accounting transactions for the most part. And when you compare the amount of data stored in an ERP system, that's measured for even large enterprises. It's maybe a terabyte or two of data. But when you look at all the other data a corporation has, just look at what they've got in emails. It's probably in a petabyte level almost. And you look at text messages, you start looking at all the stuff throwing off of sensors. The volume of data that a corporation has compared to how much of that is actually out of ERP is massively different. And that's the direction where things are going. You're exactly right. The data is not in the ERP system anymore. And that's where all the Hadoop processing, the in-memory technology, and all the new stuff, all that development effort's going there, and it's generally going in the cloud. And it's not going in an ERP system. And shame on the ERP vendors for A, not paying attention, and B, not building out solutions that could actually take advantage of all these new kinds of data. And they didn't do it because it's not in their comfort zone and they don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and most ERP vendors don't have a good API story yet either. They don't have a good story about how it's easy to make these things interoperable. And
even before even if they had a store, it wouldn't do them any good because most of them never thought about, I need to create reusable libraries of tunable algorithms, of tunable anomaly detectors, of tunable workflows, and everything else that needed to be part and parcel of the product to use all these new kinds of data and capabilities out there. And if you had these reusable libraries, well, then that's what their partners or their own service arm or their customers could use to really make these extensions happen. But just saying, I have an IoT connector, customer, you have to find a way to come up with the connector for all your different devices, whatever, to then play nice with my one and only one IoT connector. That's nothing, man. And that's not even table stakes. That's an insult to bring that to the table.
All right, now we're cooking some.
Yeah, you're getting
we're cooking some brisket. Now we are.
We got to cook it low and slow
all right,
here.
Let's run through a couple more topics. Another one I'm throwing out there is no more SaaS darlings. There's certain SaaS companies that I think get an easy ride in the analyst and media world because, let's be frank, they brought in a fresh value prop for customers and they their multi-tenant technology scales really nicely and all that stuff. It's just another form of lock-in. It's still a 3-year contract usually or whatever it is. I don't think that's the ultimate future of cloud. I think the ultimate future of cloud is customer choice, interoperable components. I choose where I want to move my workloads. I put together processes that make sense for me. I don't think it's about 3-year contracts, Brian. I really don't.
Admire your idealism, John. You'd have made a great poli-sci or something like that professor in college.
Excellent.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're talking about something that runs absolutely contrary to the Wall Street driven whims of the executive leaders of a lot of these software companies. Yeah. Not only do they want you to sign a 3-year contract, they'd like you to prepay all 3 years in advance. And worse, don't even talk to them about already negotiating future price increases or anything else after the initial term expires, because they'd rather wait and surprise the living daylights out of you after you've already got 3 years of solid built around lock-in things that are going to make it really hard to switch away from that SaaS product on the, it's a tough time out there.
Yeah, and I think what I'm saying too is not necessarily, I realize that the idealistic scenario I described, it might be a little too much for companies to deal with now. It's kind of like saying, well, let's break all these things down in a microservice. It's just like who wants to manage that?
No.
But I think what I'm just saying is let's problematize everyone, and let's not give anyone the easy way out or preordain people as market visionaries. Let's put everyone through the ringer. That's all I'm saying. Well, fortunately, I think we got a couple chips off your shoulder, which should help you to squeeze into your coach class airline seat that you're about to get on.
Grown.
So before we wrap up, maybe just on a high point, because we have definitely sort of shared a few sort of frustration points. Are there any things you're excited about right now? Any vendors that aren't your clients that you're excited about that you think people don't know about? For example, you mentioned, I think, you mentioned Era Technologies a couple times. You and I have both done pieces on them.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I think, Uptake?
Uptake, yeah. I would say Uptake probably one of the most little-known, big, and impactful tech companies out there. And in the same breath, I would recommend people also look at C3 IoT. Tom Siebel's got money in that one. Ray Lane has money in Uptake. Uptake is a double unicorn. They have an over $2 billion valuation. They have just been killing it out there and creating an alternate way of looking at how value can get created with enterprise applications. If you're in any of these asset-intensive industries, you really owe it to yourself to probably talk to them. And I'm not under any kind of anything to pitch any kind of vendor. And you know me, I'll talk smack about all of them, good, bad, and otherwise. That's one I think they had an analyst deal a few weeks back, and they had. They've got a really good story.
So before we wrap, just on that point, it's easy to talk the good talk. So how is it that this one actually, when you go to a day like that, how is it when a vendor gets across to you that they're really making a difference versus just throwing up some cool looking slides? Like, what was the difference for you that said, yeah, I got to track these folks?
So they have all these like reusable libraries of algorithms and everything else that I was talking about, analytics, widgets for their dashboards, and a million other things. And they have all these connectors that will connect to all kinds of IoT and other type of devices to suck data out of a company's technology world. Here's what's really fascinating. Is for the typical customer that they'll sign up, within 2 weeks, they've already started providing them analytic insights and are already delivering value to show them exactly how much money they can start saving now.
Right.
So where an ERP implementation might take you a year and a half, 2 years or more, these guys are freaking delivering value in just a couple of weeks. And it's because of the reusability of and the way they built their products, if you will, to have such great reuse quickly.
So taking advantage of diverse external data sources, intelligent automation features, and quick implementations are some of the core things that are resonating.
I'd add to that very deep subject matter expertise, and those guys probably have half the data scientists in the Chicago area work for Uptake. They got the horsepower to make it happen.
And I would simply add, put your customer stories out front. I mean, I've had to dig for some of the better stories I've found, and I think vendors still need to let their customers do their talking, and that's always good to catch the stories. In fact, I have another interview in just a few minutes with the customers. Look forward to that. Any final comments?
No, I got one of those lovely scrub class back of the plane airplane seats to go crawl into here. So, I'm waiting for the major carriers to start bringing chiropractic as a service, on every flight domestically in the U.S., for poor
Well, I don't think you're going to get that, but what I do want to tell you, which you may be happy about, is as your parting gift, I brought you an emotional support animal, which I'll now present to you.
My support possum, huh?
Yeah, I brought you a possum. Enjoy, Brian.
All righty. Thanks, Sean.